In a small, sun-drenched village nestled between rolling hills and dense forest, there lived a young woman named Amara. A young woman with a gift unlike any other. Amara had inherited her talent for dance from her late grandmother, Nana Bahako, a woman who was both revered and feared. Nana Bahako was known for her mysterious dances that seemed to summon rain, heal the sick, and bring peace to restless spirits. But with her passing, the villager all turned to suspicion, and Amara, as her only living relative, became the target of whispered rumors. Amara's life was far from easy. Orphaned as a child, she had been raised solely by Nana Bahako, who provided love and guidance but little in the way of material wealth. Their home, a small, thatched hut on the edge of the village, was always the last to receive the bounties of community celebrations. The villagers often viewed Amara with a mix of curiosity and caution, treating her not as one of their own but as a reminder of the otherworldly power they feared in Nana Bahako. Despite her struggles, Amara found solace in her dance. Every evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the skies in shades of orange and red, she would step into the clearing behind and move with a grace that seemed otherworldly. Her feet seemed to glide over the earth, her movements as fluid as water, and with every spin and leap, the bells on her anklets would sing softly, as though in harmony with her soul. But even her dance was not without its costs. While Amara felt alive, and during these moments, the villagers saw her performances as eerie and unnatural. The granddaughter of a witch, they muttered under their breath, their words laced with fear. Amara carried the weight of their judgment like an invisible chain, its links forged from loneliness and longing. The village itself, though picturesque, was no stranger to hardship. A long drought had gripped the land, leaving the once fertile fields dry and cracked. Hunger gnawed at bellies, and the people grew restless, searching for someone or something to blame. Amara, already an outsider, became an easy target for their frustration. Yet, in the quiet moments of her solitude, Amara would sit by the ancient baobab tree and remember her grandmother's words. Every step you take carries the whispers of the spirit. One day, they will call to you, and you must listen. At the time, Amara had dismissed those words as the ramblings of an old woman steeped in folklore. But as the drought dragged on and the villagers' resentment deepened, she began to wonder if there was more to her gift than she had ever imagined. Little did she know, her life was about to take a turn. She could never have anticipated a path that would lead her to discover the true power of her dance and the heavy price it demanded. It was an ordinary morning, but a strange silence hung over the village. The night before, the beloved elder of the community, Baba Okoye, had passed away unexpectedly. Baba Okoye wasn't just any man, he was the heart and soul of the village. He listened to everyone's problems, offered wisdom, and united the people with his gentle word. His death left a void, not just in the lives of the villagers, but in the very spirit of the community. Grief loomed heavy over the people as they gathered outside Baba Okoye's home, where a small mourning ceremony was underway. The air was filled with hushed voices, soft sobs, and the occasional murmur of uncertainty. How will we go on without him? Someone whispered. What will become of the village? These questions hung in the air, unanswered, casting a shadow over the gathering. It was during this time of despair that a mysterious figure appeared in the village, a traveler named Nuru, known far and wide for his spiritual wisdom and enigmatic ways. Nuru's arrival felt almost otherworldly. Dressed in flowing robes stained with ash, his eyes seemed to pierce straight into the soul of anyone who met his gaze. The villagers, already vulnerable in their grief, regarded him with a mix of hope and apprehension. Nuru approached Amara, who stood at a distance, quietly observing the scene. "You're the one I have been searching for," he said, his voice deep and commanding. Amara, startled and unsure, met his gaze. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at her, as though he could see something in her that she couldn't see herself. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You have a gift," Nuru replied, "a gift passed down to your bloodline. Your dance is not just movement, it is a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. You can bring Baba Okoye back, if only for a moment, to guide the people one last time. Amara froze. The words felt impossible, yet they stirred something deep within her. Memories of her grandmother's cryptic teachings came flooding back. Every step carries the whispers of spirit. One day they will call to you. Could this be what Nana Bahako meant? I'm just a dancer, Amara protested. I don't have the power to bring anyone back. Nuru's lips curved into a faint smile. Your dance has the power to open doors that should remain closed. But be warned, such power comes at a price. Are you prepared to face the consequences? The villagers, overhearing this exchange, were skeptical at first. But grief and desperation are powerful motivators. If she can bring Baba Okoye back, even for a moment, we can seek his guidance, someone murmured. The idea began to spread like wildfire. Soon, the crowd turned to Amara, their eyes filled with both hope and expectation. Amara felt trapped. On one hand, this could be her chance to prove herself, to finally earn the acceptance she had longed for her entire life. On the other hand, Nuru's warning echoed in her mind. What if something went wrong? What if the price was too high? Her mind wrestled with doubt and fear, but the villagers' pleading faces weighed heavily on her heart. She thought of her grandmother's words again, a faint sense of destiny stirring within her. Slowly, she nodded. I will do it, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. But if something goes wrong, I ask for your forgiveness. That night, the village gathered in the central square under the light of the full moon. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. Drums began to beat, their rhythm deep and steady, echoing through the stillness. Amara stood in the center, her anklets shimmering with a strange, soft glow. All eyes were on her. The weight of the moment pressed down on her shoulders. She knew that what she was about to do could change everything for better or worse. As the first beat of the drum rang out, she took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and prepared to step into the unknown. The night was still, yet the air seemed to hum with an energy Amara had never felt before. She stood at the center of the village square, her feet bare against the cool earth, and the anklets around her ankles shimmering faintly in the moonlight. The drums had begun their deep, steady rhythm, each beat reverberating through her chest like a summons she couldn't ignore. But as the first step of her dance hovered on the edge of her mind, doubt crept in. What if Nuru was wrong? What if she failed and the village turned on her? Or worse, what if the cost was greater than she could bear? She glanced at Nuru, who stood at the edge of the square, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her shiver. Don't hesitate, he said softly, his voice cutting through the distant murmur of the crowd. The spirits are listening. If you falter, they may not answer your call. Amara swallowed hard and nodded, but her limbs felt heavy. The faces in the crowd were a mix of fear, hope, and suspicion. She saw Maya, her childhood friend, standing near the front, her expression conflicted. Maya had always been one of the few who believed in Amara, but even she looked uncertain tonight. Amara, Maya whispered when their eyes met. Are you sure about this? What if something goes wrong? I don't know, Amara admitted, her voice barely audible. But they need Baba Okoye. If I can bring him back, even for a moment, maybe they'll finally see me as one of them. Maya's eyes filled with worry. And if they don't, what about you? Amara had no answer. The drums grew louder, pulling Amara's focus back to the present. She took a deep breath and began to move. Her steps were slow at first, hesitant as though testing the weight of the moment. The bells on her anklets chimed softly, a delicate counterpoint to the pounding rhythm. With each step, she felt the earth beneath her feet grow warmer, the air around her heavier. The crowd fell silent, their collective breath held as they watched. Amara's movements became more fluid, her body surrendering to the rhythm. Her anklets, once a simple adornment, seemed alive, their glow intensifying with each beat. But then a sharp, chilling wind swept through the square, making the torches flicker wildly. The villagers gasped, clutching each other as shadows began to shift and lengthen around them. Amara stumbled, her heart racing. Was this supposed to happen? Nuru's voice rang out, calm yet commanding. Do not stop. The doorway is opening. Amara pressed on, but fear gnawed at her resolve. The wind grew stronger, carrying with it whispers soft, unintelligible, and haunting. She felt as though unseen eyes were watching her every move, judging her, waiting for her to falter. And then, Out of the corner of her eye, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A figure, faint and flickering, began to take shape near the edge of the square. It was unmistakably Baba Okoye, his form translucent but recognizable. The villagers cried out, some falling to their knees in awe, others recoiling in fear. Amara's heart leapt. It was working. But her relief was short-lived. As Baba Okoye's figure grew clearer, more shadows began to stir at the edges of the square. They moved erratically, like smoke caught in a whirlwind, and their presence sent a chill down Amara's spine. She realized, with dawning horror, that it wasn't just Baba Okoye who had been drawn to her dance. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, overlapping into a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from every direction. Amara's movements faltered, her body trembling as an overwhelming sense of dread washed over her. "Keep going," Noru shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I can't," Amara cried, her breath coming in short, panicked gasp. "You must." Noru stepped forward, his face stern. "The doorway is not yet closed. If you stop now, you will unleash something far worse than you can imagine." Amara's eyes darted to the crowd. Maya was shouting something, but her words were drowned out by the noise. The villagers were in disarray, some trying to flee, others frozen in place. Baba Okoye's voice cut through the madness, calm and steady despite the growing chaos. "Amara," he said, his gaze locking onto hers, "you have awakened more than you intended, but you can still set things right. Finish the dance." Tears streamed down Amara's face as she forced herself to move again. Her limbs felt like lead, every step an act of sheer willpower. The whispers grew louder, angrier, as though the spirits were fighting her, resisting her attempts to restore balance. The air around her became stifling, the glow of her anklets almost blinding. She felt as though she were being pulled in two directions, one foot in the world of the living, the other in the realm of the dead. Her body ached, her heart pounded, and yet she danced, driven by a determination she hadn't known she possessed. Just as the whispers reached a deafening crescendo, Amara's dance reached its peak. Her final step sent a shockwave through the air, a burst of light that momentarily blinded everyone. When the light faded, the square was silent once more. Baba Okoye was gone, his figure dissolved into the night. The shadows had retreated, leaving only faint traces of their presence. The villagers stared at Amara, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. Amara collapsed to the ground, her body trembling with exhaustion. Nuru rushed to her side, his expression unreadable. "You did well," he said, his tone devoid of triumph. "But the balance has been disturbed. This is not over." Amara looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. "What do you mean?" Nuru's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the faint outlines of dark clouds were gathering. "The doorway may be closed for now, but the spirits will not forget what you've done. You have drawn their attention, and they will come again. Be ready." As the villagers gathered around her, some offering thanks, others keeping their distance, Amara felt the weight of her actions settling heavily on her shoulders. She had brought Baba Okoye back, but at what cost? The night may have ended, but Amara knew her battle was far from over. The air around the village square was heavy, almost suffocating. Amara lay on the ground, her body trembling from exhaustion, her breath shallow. The villagers stared, their faces a mix of awe, fear and confusion. Baba Okoye's ghostly figure had vanished into the night, but the echoes of his presence lingered in the thick. Before Amara could process what had happened, Nuru stepped forward, his voice cutting through the stillness. "It is not over," he said, his tone as sharp as a blade. The crowd shifted uneasily, murmurs rippling through the gathered villagers. Amara struggled to her feet, her legs weak beneath her. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Nuru's eyes burned with intensity. "You opened the doorway between worlds, but you did not close it. The spirits you summoned are still here, watching, waiting. They demand balance, and until it is restored, the village is in danger." A gasp rippled through the crowd. The villagers looked to Amara, their hope turning into fear. Some began to back away, whispering accusations. "What has she done? She's brought a curse upon us." "No!" Maya's voice rang out, steady and defiant. She stepped forward, placing herself between Amara and the growing tide of hostility. "Amara did this for us. If there's a price to be paid, we'll face it together. But Nuru shook his head, his expression grim. The price must be paid by her alone. The spirits demand a sacrifice, something of great value, something irreplaceable. Without it, their wrath will consume the village. The words hit Amara like a blow. Her heart pounded in her chest, fear clawing at her throat. Sacrifice, she whispered, barely able to form the word. Nuru nodded sullenly. Yes, the spirits have been disturbed. They seek balance. You must give them something to satisfy their hunger, a piece of yourself. The villagers recoiled, their fear deepening. Some began to cry, others shouted angrily, their voices overlapping in a chaotic din. Maya turned to Nuru, her face pale. You can't ask her to do this. There has to be another way. There is no other way, Nuru replied coldly. The spirits are not merciful. They have been awakened, and they will not rest until they are appeased. Amara stood frozen, her mind racing. What could she possibly give that would be enough? Her dance, her life, her very essence, it all seemed like too much. And yet, as she looked around at the frightened faces of the villagers, she knew there was no escaping this. I'll do it, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Maya grabbed her arm, panic flashing in her eyes. Amara, no, you don't owe them this. Let them face the spirits themselves. Amara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I have to. If I don't, the village will suffer. This is my responsibility. Nuru stepped closer, holding out a small ceremonial dagger. Its blade shimmered in the moonlight, etched with strange, ancient symbols. The spirits will take what they need, he said, his voice heavy with finality. Amara took the dagger, her hand shaking. She stepped into the center of the square, where the ground seemed to pulse faintly beneath her feet. The villagers watched in stunned silence, their breath held as they waited for what would come next. She raised the dagger, her heart pounding in her chest. What do I offer? She asked, her voice barely audible. Nuru's gaze bore into hers. Your gift, he said simply. The thing that makes you who you are. Your dance. Amara's heart sank. Her dance was not just a skill, it was her identity, her connection to her grandmother, her only solace in a world that had always pushed her to the margins. To give it up felt like losing a part of her soul. The wind began to pick up again, swirling around her with an almost sentient force. The whispers returned, louder this time, their voices echoing in her mind. She could feel the spirits closing in, their presence pressing against her like a physical weight. With trembling hands, Amara lowered the dagger and began to dance. This time, her movements were not filled with grace and joy, but with sorrow and sacrifice. Each step felt like a goodbye, each spin a farewell to a piece of herself. The anklets around her feet glowed brightly, their light pulsating with every beat of the drum. The ground beneath her began to shift, glowing faintly with the same eerie light. The spirits appeared, their forms swirling like mist, their voices rising in a haunting chorus. Amara could feel them pulling at her, their energy consuming her dance, draining the very essence of her being. Tears streamed down her face as she poured everything she had into the movements, her body aching, her soul breaking. The villagers watched in stunned silence, some weeping openly, others frozen in place. As the dance reached its climax, a blinding light erupted from the anklets, engulfing the square. The whispers ceased, replaced by a deafening silence. Amara collapsed to the ground, her body limp, the anklets now dull and lifeless. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she noticed was the stillness. The wind had stopped, the air was calm, and the oppressive weight of the spirits was gone. The villagers began to stir, murmurs of relief spreading to the crowd. But as Amara tried to stand, she realized something was missing. Her legs felt heavy, unresponsive. She tried to move, but the fluid grace she had always known was gone. Panic set in as she looked down at her feet, now bare and ordinary. Maya rushed to her side, tears streaming down her face. Amara, are you okay? Amara shook her head, her voice breaking. It's gone. My dance is gone. Nuru knelt beside her, his expression unreadable. The spirits have taken what they needed. You have restored balance, but the cost was great. The villagers gathered around, some offering words of thanks, others too ashamed to meet her gaze. Amara felt hollow, her identity stripped away. But as she looked at the faces of her people, no longer fearful, no longer divided, she knew it had been worth it. In the silence that followed, the village square stood as a testament to what had been lost and gained. Amara had saved them, but at the cost of herself. And as the night wore on, the echoes of her final dance lingered in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. The morning after the dance, the village awoke to an unusual stillness. The wind that had howled through the night was now calm, and the oppressive air of unease that had hung over the village for weeks was gone. The sun broke through the clouds, its light casting a warm glow over the fields and homes. For the first time in months, the village felt at peace. Amara sat beneath the ancient baobab tree near her home, her legs stretched out in front of her, the dull anklets resting in her lap. Her movements were stiff, her once fluid grace now a distant memory. Every muscle in her body ached, but the pain in her heart was far greater. Her dance, her identity, her solace was gone. Maya sat beside her, silent but present, her hand resting gently on Amara's. She hadn't left her side since the night before, offering quiet comfort when words felt insufficient. The villagers had come earlier, bringing offerings of food and gifts as a token of their gratitude. Some had even bowed their heads in apology, acknowledging the weight of what they had asked of her. Well, Maya said softly, breaking the silence. They're scared. They don't know how to thank you for what you've done. Amara nodded but said nothing. She knew the villagers' gratitude was genuine, but it couldn't fill the void left inside her. For years, her dance had been her connection to her grandmother, her escape from loneliness, her way of expressing the emotions she couldn't put into words. Now, that connection was severed, and she felt like a stranger in her own skin. Over the following days, the village began to heal. The fields, once dry and cracked, showed signs of new life. Tiny green shoots emerged from the soil, promising a bountiful harvest to come. The villagers, inspired by Amara's sacrifice, worked together with a unity that hadn't existed before. Where there had been division and suspicion, there was now cooperation and trust. Baba, Okoi's words, spoken through the veil of the spirit world, echoed in their hearts. Focus on the living, for it is they who need you most. The villagers began to embody this lesson, caring for one another in ways they hadn't before. They built stronger bonds, shared their resources, and faced their challenges as one. Amara watched this transformation from the sidelines, a bittersweet pride swelling in her chest. She had given up something precious, but in doing so, she had brought her people together. The village was stronger, kinder, more united, and for the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Nuru approached Amara near the baobab tree. His expression was unreadable, but there was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You've done more than I ever thought possible," he said, his voice low and steady. Amara looked up at him, her gaze tired but resolute. "I don't feel like I've done enough. I've lost the one thing that made me who I am." Nuru shook his head. "You are not your dance, Amara. Your gift was never just about movement, it was about connection, about bringing people together. That is something the spirits cannot take from you." Amara frowned, unsure if she believed him. "But what am I without it?" "You are someone who faced the impossible and triumphed," Nuru replied. "You are someone who sacrificed for the greater good, and you are someone who has shown this village what it means to truly care for one another. That is who you are, Amara." As the days turned into weeks, Amara began to find a new sense of purpose. She couldn't dance as she once had, but she discovered other ways to contribute to the village. She taught the children the old stories her grandmother had passed down, preserving their traditions and history. She became a trusted voice of wisdom, her experiences giving her a depth of understanding that the villagers came to rely on. The villagers, in turn, honored her sacrifice. They built a small shrine near the baobab tree, dedicating it to the spirits and to Amara, who had brought balance to their world. The shrine became a place of reflection, where the villagers would go to seek guidance and remember the lessons they had learned. The moral of Amara's story spread far beyond the village, carried by travelers and storytellers to distant lands. It became a tale of selflessness, resilience, and the importance of community. People learned that true strength lies not in holding onto what we value most, but in knowing when to let go for the greater good. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Amara's place? Let us know, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic tales that teach life's most important lessons.